Hey guys, tonight we begin with a deep dive into something that sounds simple, but was often the most miserable experience for half of the royal population, the political marriage. Settle in, dim your lights, and get cozy. We're going to be talking about women who were, let's be honest, essentially high-value chess pieces. They were born, they were educated just enough, and then they were shipped across a continent. In a large, uncomfortable boxer, a carriage to merge to kingdoms, or more frequently just to family fortunes, that were already far too rich. These stories aren't about dramatic assassinations or massive battles. They're much quieter, much sadder. They're about long, boring voyages, foreign languages they didn't speak, and being emotionally starved in a very big, cold palace. We're looking at the ultimate tragic contrast: immense wealth and power, combined with zero personal agency. Because, of course, you get a crown, but you don't get to choose your actual life. So let's float over to a particular disaster named Juana of Castile ***, or, as history eventually and quite cruelly labeled her, Juana *** la Loca *** Joanna the Mad. We begin with the usual disclaimer. Juana was never, ever supposed to be queen. She was born in 1479 in Toledo. Her parents were the famous **Reyes Católicos **. All the Catholic monarchs, Isabella I of Castile and Ferdinand and II of Aragon. Now, this was the ultimate power couple of the 15th century. They were a brand, frankly. They had united Spain, finished the Reconquista and just 3 years after Juana was born, they funded a certain Italian navigator who was absolutely sure he knew a shortcut to Asia. So, the family business was booming, to say the least. Juana was the second oldest of their 5 children. Her older sister, Isabella, was the designated heir to the whole operation. Her brother, John, was the male spare, because you always need a male spare, right? That meant Juana was a **third** spare, a perfectly acceptable, but ultimately non-essential, piece of the dynastic puzzle. This meant she could actually be smart. She received an incredibly good education. She spoke Spanish, Latin, and French. She was interested in mathematics, in law, in history. She wasn't just trained to embroider and look pretty. She was actually trained to be an intellectual. But here is the tragic irony of her life. All that sharp intellect was eventually twisted, corrupted, and finally dismissed entirely by the men around her who found her intellect inconvenient. But first, the marriage. By the mid-1490s, the family needed to deal with France. France, as always, was being bothersome. So Isabella and Ferdinand decided to do the most complicated thing possible, which was a double marriage alliance with the House of Habsburg. Because why just deal with one complicated royal family when you can deal with 2? Juana's brother, John, was married off to Margaret of Austria, and Juana, our smart, quiet, educated second spare, was shipped off in 1496 to the Low Countries to marry Philip the Handsome **. Philip the Handsome. That's a name that has carried through history. But let's just pause and be a little snarky about the aesthetics of European royalty, shall we? He was a Habsburg. He was Archduke of Austria and Duke of Burgundy. He was powerful. He was a massive political prize. And yes, he had the classic Habsburg look, which means he had a rather pronounced jaw. He was handsome asterisk by dynastic standards asterisk, which means he was genetically qualified, and the PR team did the rest. Wallace's voyage across the Bay of Biscay was, as historical voyages often are, horrendous. She was seasick and delayed. But when she finally arrived in Flanders, the official story immediately became a drama worthy of a soap opera. She and Philip were supposed to have a formal state wedding, very proper, very slow, very medieval. But the moment Warner saw Philip, she apparently forgot every single bit of her extensive education. She fell, shall we say, head dash over dash heels. The story goes that Warner was so overcome that she insisted the marriage take place asterisk immediately asterisk. She refused to eat, sleep, or move until they were married. This was an unseemly emotional display for a Spanish princess, and everyone was probably scandalized. But Philip, the handsome one, was apparently not entirely opposed to skipping the long ceremony. So, they got a dispensation, and they were married just hours after she arrived. This was the first clue that Warner's deep, passionate, and frankly overwhelming emotional capacity was going to be a problem in the cold, transactional world of European royalty. And it was all downhill from there. Because Philip the Handsome was an absolute disaster of a husband. He was a serial adulterer, a constant, lazy, and unapologetic wanderer. He was handsome, remember, so he felt entitled to be awful. Warner, who was passionately in love with him, did not handle this well. She had outbursts. She would throw things. There is one story which is famous for being tragic and a little bit ridiculous, where she finds out about one of Philip's dalliances with a court woman. Warner in a rage attacks the woman with a pair of shears and cuts off her hair. Now in our modern world, we might label this a massive, understandable emotional meltdown from a young woman stuck in a terrible, controlling marriage. In the 1500s, this was evidence of madness, A woman being passionate, demanding loyalty, and showing jealousy was simply not acceptable, particularly when she was a political chess piece. She was supposed to be docile and produce heirs. Instead, she was having emotional meltdowns. But then, the dynastic universe decided to have a massive, cruel joke at Warner's expense. Remember those 3 people ahead of her in the line of succession. Her sister Isabella, her brother John, and her nephew Miguel. Well, between 1497 and 1500, they all conveniently died. It was a rapid, utterly devastating sweep of the Spanish royal family. The mortality rates for royal children were, of course, appalling. But this was a statistically horrifying sequence of events. And suddenly, Warner was not the spare. She was the absolute to the crowns of Castile and Aragon. This was a nightmare scenario for everyone involved. It was a nightmare for her parents, Isabella and Ferdinand, who had spent decades consolidating power and now had to hand it over to their unpredictable, highly emotional daughter, and worse, her feckless, cheating Habsburg husband. And it was certainly a nightmare for Warner, who was now being yanked from the Low Countries, where she was at least near her husband even if he was awful, back to Spain to be officially sworn in as heir, Philip, of course, absolutely loved it. He was now husband to the future Queen of Spain. He was going to be king consort, or king jur uxoris *, which basically means king in right of his wife. His ambition, which was already overinflated thanks to the handsome title, now knew no bounds. He wanted the power, but he definitely didn't want the queen. The constant tension between them was exhausting, even for an observer. She was desperately seeking his affection, and he was desperately avoiding her while plotting how to gain more power over her vast inheritance. When Isabella I, Juana's formidable mother, finally died in 1504, the situation went from chronic tension to acute crisis. Juana was officially Queen of Castile. Philip was officially king. Philip, almost immediately, attempted to have Juana legally declared incapable of ruling. The grounds: her emotional behavior, her jealousy, her madness. Her father, Ferdinand, who was still alive and very much interested in keeping Aragon, didn't exactly rush to her defense. He was much more interested in protecting the family brand and his own power. It became a quiet, relentless psychological war between husband, wife, and father. Juana gave birth to 6 children during this time, which is an amazing feat considering the political drama and the fact that they were almost constantly separated by his ambition and her paranoia. Among those children was Charles V, who would later inherit everything, and Catherine of Austria, who would become Queen of Portugal. But that is a story for another time. The end of the tragic marriage came suddenly in 1506. Philip the Handsome, at the age of 28, died after a very brief illness, likely typhoid fever. He was handsome, but apparently not robust. And this is where the La Loca narrative truly becomes entrenched and tragically gothic. Juana was heartbroken, utterly, completely devastated. Her response to his death was beyond the typical royal grieving period. She refused to allow his coffin to be buried immediately. She kept the casket with her. And here is the image that history will never forget. Juana, pregnant with her last child, traveling with a large entourage across the Spanish countryside, carrying the sealed coffin of her husband. She refused to allow women to approach the coffin, believing that a virtuous man like Philip, yes, she still thought he was virtuous. Bless her heart, could not possibly tolerate the presence of other women. Even in death, this journey, undertaken in the deepest Spanish winter, was the final, undeniable proof that the Queen was emotionally unstable and that she needed to be managed, controlled, and, most importantly, removed. Her father, Ferdinand, seized the opportunity. He had a royal daughter who was too erratic to rule, and a deceased son-in-law who was no longer a political threat. The solution was simple and chillingly efficient. In 1509, Juana was confined to the royal palace in Tordesillas. It was not a dungeon, but it was certainly a prison. Her remaining years, all 46 of them, were spent in quiet, forced solitude. She was queen, but she never truly ruled. She was the definition of a political marriage gone wrong, not just in the joining, but in the tragic aftermath of the severing. And with that gentle reminder of the high cost of dynastic chess, let's take a breath before we float over to another woman, whose political marriage sent her down an equally bleak, but far weirder historical rabbit hole. let's float over from the Mad Queen of Spain to her younger sister, who experienced a different kind of marriage disaster. This one with a distinctly English flavor of slow, damp, and bureaucratic misery. We are talking about Catherine of Aragon who was yet another pawn of those two political masterminds, Isabella and Ferdinand. Because, as we established, if you are a daughter in that family, you are essentially a very expensive treaty. So, Catherine was the youngest surviving child of the Catholic monarchs, which meant her destiny was always going to be the biggest, shiniest political alliance they could afford. And in the late 1400s, that meant England. The goal was to join the powerful, newly secured Spanish kingdoms with the newly established Tudor dynasty in England. The Tudors were, frankly, still a little shaky on the throne, so the Spanish alliance was a massive, necessary seal of legitimacy. The chosen groom was Arthur, Prince of Wales Now, Arthur is one of those figures in history who exists purely to be a disappointment. He was designated to marry Catherine, and they were supposed to secure the Tudor future. He was, by all accounts, pale, sickly, and utterly unmemorable. His name comes from King Arthur, of course, because the Tudors really wanted everyone to forget they were Welsh upstarts and start believing they were ancient legends. Catherine arrived in England in 1501, which, if you are a Spanish princess who grew up in the warm Castilian sun, is probably an immediate, lifelong trauma. She was 15. The first thing that hit her was likely the sheer, overwhelming dampness of the English climate, which just never really leaves you alone. She married Arthur with great pomp and circumstance. The political marriage was complete, but this is where the dark, quiet comedy of history really sets in. They were married in November, and they were promptly shipped off to Ludlow Castle on the cold Welsh border, because why not? That's where the Prince of Wales was supposed to learn to rule. He was 15, she was 15, and they were suddenly alone in a vast, drafty medieval castle in the middle of nowhere. The historical records suggest they lived as husband and wife, but we can assume it was probably awkward, quiet, and not terribly romantic. But the truly important part of their marriage was its brevity, because Arthur, the pale, sickly prince, didn't last long in that damp Welsh air. Just 5 months after the wedding, in April 1502, Arthur dropped dead, likely sweating sickness, or maybe just acute Tudors can't handle the cold issue. And just like that, Catherine was a political widow. She was 16 years old, stuck in a foreign, chilly country, unable to speak the language perfectly. And now, suddenly, her entire purpose was null and void. But her parents, Isabella and Ferdinand, hadn't invested all that gold and all those political favors just to ship her home. She was valuable. She was married for 5 months, which was just enough time for the Spanish to swear up and down that the marriage was never consummated. Because if it hadn't been consummated, she could marry Arthur's younger brother. The younger brother was Henry. Now, this Henry was a big problem. He was the spare, which meant he was fun, athletic, handsome, genuinely handsome, not Habsburg handsome, and completely unprepared to be king. But with Arthur gone, He was now Henry, Prince of Wales and later, of course, King Henry VIII. And so began the miserable 7-year period of limbo for Catherine. She was housed in England. She was technically engaged to Henry, but the marriage couldn't happen immediately because of papal dispensations, because, she was his brother's wife and, more importantly, because the Spanish and English monarchs spent 7 years arguing over the dowry installment. It's always about the money, isn't it? Imagine being Catherine during this time, a Spanish princess living in a quiet palace, dependent on a tiny royal allowance, knowing that her entire life hinged on a series of political meetings about her father sending enough cash to her future father-in-law. She was essentially a hostage, albeit a fancy one. She often had to sell pieces of her own jewelry just to pay her waiting women. It was humiliating, cold, and slow. Finally, in 1509, Henry VII died, and Henry VIII immediately married Catherine. Because why wait when you're young, handsome, and now King of England? The first years were actually quite good. Henry loved her. She was smart, pious, and beautiful in a very Spanish, dark-haired, dignified way. But the ultimate purpose of her political marriage, the reason she was shipped over there in the first place, was to produce the heir And this is where the tragedy sets in, quiet and relentless. She had miscarriages. She had stillbirths. The records of her pregnancies are just a list of heartbreaking losses. It was a statistical nightmare. A stillborn daughter, a son Henry, Duke of Cornwall, who lived for only 52 days, another stillborn son, and then another son who died at birth. It was a dynasty running on empty. And out of all this tragedy, only one child survived to adulthood, a daughter, Mary. Now, a daughter is wonderful, but in the Tudor dynasty, in the 1520s, a daughter was simply not good enough. And Henry VIII, who had been a good, doting husband, started to get antsy. He wasn't just worried about his heir. He was worried about a biblical curse. He started to believe that because he had married his brother's wife, God was punishing him with a lack of sons. Because, of course, it couldn't possibly be a generic royal fertility issue. It had to be a divine sign that she was the problem. And this paranoia, this need for a male spare, is what triggered the entire English Reformation. The last part of Catherine's life was an even slower, more miserable period of limbo than the first. Henry wanted an annulment. Catherine, a devout Catholic and the daughter of the most powerful monarchs in Europe, refused because, technically, she was the king's true wife. The political marriage, which had been designed to create an unbreakable bond between Spain and England, now became the ultimate political wedge. She was cast out of court. She was separated from her daughter, Mary. She was queen in name, but utterly abandoned. She was forced to live in a series of increasingly gloomy, remote castles, while Henry basically ghosted her for years, all while trying to maneuver the entire structure of European religion just to get a divorce. Which, is a bit dramatic just to get out of a marriage you've decided is boring. Catherine of Aragon, the highly educated Spanish princess, died in exile in a cold castle in 1536. She was denied the title of queen, denied access to her daughter, and utterly destroyed by the political transaction that was her life. Her last letter to Henry was an incredibly dignified plea for him to treat their daughter well. She was the ultimate symbol of the tragic, quiet truth of political marriages. Your worth expires the moment you fail to deliver the male heir. And with that gentle reminder of how terrible Tudor England was for foreign wives, let us float off to another royal woman whose family history of *** inbreeding *** made her marriage a talking genetic disaster from the start. Let's float over to another royal disaster, one that takes us right back into the dark, echoing, and genetically perilous halls of the Spanish Habsburg court. We are talking about a woman whose marriage was not merely political, but absolutely a family reunion, a genetic double knot that would ultimately snap their line forever. We are talking about *** Mariana of Austria ***. Mariana of Austria was born in 1634. She was an archduchess, an Austrian Habsburg, which means, from birth, her role in life was to marry a Spanish Habsburg. It was a closed loop of cousins and uncles designed purely to keep all the wealth and, more importantly, all the bad genes inside the family vault. Her political marriage was initially designed for her to marry her first cousin, Balthasar Charles, Prince of Asturias ***. He was the son of Philip IV of Spain ***. The idea was to keep the Spanish and Austrian branches of the family intertwined, which was the Habsburg hobby. Apparently, Balthasar Charles was the heir, and the pressure on him was immense. Even as a child, he was being groomed to rule a kingdom that was, frankly, already starting to look like a giant, gorgeous, leaky sieve. But he was alive, he was male, and he was the hope of the entire dynasty. And then, in 1646, at the tender age of 16, Balthasar Charles died of smallpox. Just gone. The dynastic universe strikes again with its brutal efficiency. Now, this was a disaster for Spain. Philip IV had no male heir. His first wife was dead. The entire future of the most powerful monarchy in the world was suddenly hanging by a thread. But guess who was still a perfectly dynastically correct piece of the puzzle? Our Mariana. She was still engaged to the deceased son, but now the Spanish decided, well, why not double down? So, at the age of 14, Mariana was shipped off to Madrid to marry her uncle, Philip IV himself. Philip was 43. He was her uncle and her first cousin once removed. Because when you're a Habsburg, apparently your family tree is less of a tree and more of a decorative wreath. This political marriage was purely a reproductive Hail Mary pass. Philip IV was a tired, melancholy, and rather boring monarch. He was also obsessed with art and poetry, which is a nice hobby, but it doesn't exactly make for a charming husband, especially when he's nearly 30 years older than you. Mariana arrived, and the pressure was immediate and horrifying. Her entire purpose was to succeed where Philip's previous wife had failed. Produce a viable male heir who could survive the gauntlet of Spanish Habsburg genetics. She was pregnant 6 times in quick succession. The list of her children is a quiet, Devastating accounting of the consequences of extreme inbreeding. 1. A daughter. Margarita Teresa who survived. She's famous for being the central figure in Velázquez's painting Los Meninas a perfect, ironic portrait of a child who was nothing but a diplomatic prize. 2. A son. Maria Ambrosia who died as an infant. 3. A son. Philip Prospero who was a terrifying tragedy. He was clearly frail, suffering from seizures, constant illness, and just an absolute catalogue of congenital issues. He was swaddled in so many religious charms and amulets that he barely looked human. The relief when this sickly boy was born must have been overwhelming, followed immediately by the crushing dread of watching him constantly struggle to live. For another son, Tomás Carlos who also died very quickly. And finally, in 1661, after 4 more dead or dying children, Mariana gave birth to her 6th child, a son, Charles This boy was the culmination of 2 centuries of relentless, intentional inbreeding within the Habsburg line. Charles II of Spain, or, as history cruelly but accurately named him, Charles the Bewitched Charles was an absolute dynastic nightmare. He was intellectually disabled, couldn't talk until he was 4, couldn't walk until he was 8, and had an enormous, grotesque Habsburg jaw prognathism so severe that he could barely chew his food or close his mouth. He drooled constantly, and he was sickly, weak, and undersized. Imagine being Mariana. You have finally done your duty, endured 6 pregnancies, and given birth to the male heir. But the prize is this frail, heartbreaking child who is clearly not going to be a functional king. The very genetic closeness that was supposed to secure the dynasty had instead delivered its ultimate, final poison pill. When Philip IV died in 1665, Mariana, at the age of 31, became the regent of Spain. This meant she was now in charge of an empire that was rotting from the inside, all while managing a 4-year-old son who was literally a genetic time bomb. Her regency was a miserable period of political infighting. The Spanish nobles hated her because she was Austrian. Her own half-brother, Don Juan José, plotted against her constantly. The economy was collapsing, and through it all, she had this quiet, dreadful task, protecting her vulnerable, strange son. She was a deeply religious woman, and she tried to use superstition and piety to protect Charles. She truly believed that his condition wasn't genetic disaster. It was demonic possession which is where the bewitched nickname came from. Because why deal with the horrific truth of inbreeding when you can blame a grumpy demon? She brought in exorcists. She commissioned rituals. She was desperate, and her desperation manifested as a kind of political paralysis. As she poured her energy into spiritual defense rather than sensible governance, her political marriage brought her a crown, but it robbed her of a functional husband, a stable reign, and, most cruelly, a healthy son. She spent the rest of her life trapped in the labyrinthine Spanish court, desperately trying to marry off her daughter Margarita Teresa to secure another slightly less inbred alliance. She married her uncle Leopold I, of course, because old habits die hard. Mariana's story is a profound, quiet tragedy of a woman forced to hold up a collapsing empire and a collapsing bloodline. She was the unwilling midwife to the end of one of history's greatest dynasties. She died in 1696, 9 years before her son, the last of the Spanish Habsburgs, finally followed her. The line was extinguished not by a foreign army, but by its own narcissistic, inbred logic. The political marriage here wasn't about territory. It was about protecting wealth through incest. And the price was paid in the quiet, heartbreaking suffering of women like Mariana, who were forced to love and raise the consequences of those choices. Let's take a slow, gentle breath and let the quiet, sad ghosts of the Spanish Habsburgs settle before we float over to a story of a woman whose life was ruined not by a lack of an heir, but by a sudden violent shift in cultural tastes ***. Let's take a slow, gentle breath and let the quiet, sad ghosts of the Spanish Habsburgs settle before we float over to a story of a woman whose life was ruined not by a lack of an heir, but by a sudden, violent shift in cultural tastes ***. We are sailing across the English Channel, back to the Tudor court. But a few decades after poor Catherine of Aragon finally found peace, Henry VIII is still king, of course, still large, still obsessed with an heir, and now, finally, widowed again after Jane Seymour died. It's the late 1530s, and Henry is desperate for a new alliance. England is politically isolated after his massive, dramatic break from the Catholic Church move. We discussed earlier that was mostly just a very expensive divorce petition. He needs a Protestant ally on the continent. This is where we meet ***, Anne of Cleves ***. Anne of Cleves was a German princess from the Duchy of Jülich-Klevesburg. Say that 3 times fast in a sleepy voice. It was a useful political power, a perfect Protestant counterbalance to the Catholic giants of Spain and France. And so, Anne was designated as the 4th wife of the most terrifyingly powerful and easily bored man in England. The marriage was entirely the brainchild of ***, Thomas Cromwell ***, Henry's chief minister, who was great at paperwork but, as it turns out, terrible at knowing what Henry VIII found attractive. The primary tragedy of Anne's political marriage, the reason it failed spectacularly, wasn't plague, or death, or even adultery. It was ***fashion ***, and was raised in a small, conservative, and frankly old-fashioned court. In her corner of Germany, women were expected to be deeply modest, wearing heavy, high-necked gowns that concealed almost everything. They were also not taught music or languages other than German, because they were expected to be quiet, pious wives, not glittery court ornaments. Meanwhile, Henry VIII had spent 2 decades building the most glittering, Italian-influenced, and modern court in all of Europe. His wives were expected to speak French, play the lute, dance exquisitely, and wear low-cut French gowns that showed off a certain Tudor flair, and was, simply put, a terrible cultural fit. She was the wrong kind of princess for the king's very specific and increasingly fragile ego. Before she arrived, Henry, being the man he was, insisted on seeing a portrait. This is where Hans Holbein the Younger steps in. An artist who was a genius, but perhaps a bit of a diplomatic deceiver. Holbein painted Anne in her full German splendor. Conservative clothes, high neckline, a very gentle, placid expression. He was a master, and he painted her with such attention to detail that she looked, to Cromwell's eye, perfectly acceptable, if not quite a Tudor goddess. Henry saw the portrait and agreed. The match was sealed. He thought she was good enough to start the long, cold journey to England. This is the great, ironic contrast. Henry was called King of England, but he was ruled entirely by his own shallow visual expectations. He liked her portrait, but what he got in person was a whole different story. When arrived on New Year's Day, 1540, Henry, in a move that was supposed to be romantic, but was actually just utterly bizarre, decided to surprise her. He dressed up in disguise, like a character from a cheap Renaissance play, and rushed into her private chambers to give her a kiss and a gift. He expected her to instantly recognize him, be overcome with joy, and fall passionately into his large arms. Because, of course, everyone should instantly recognize Henry VIII, and did not. She had absolutely no idea who this massive, slightly aggressive man in weird clothes was. She was a modest German princess. She was probably terrified and kept her eyes down. She reacted exactly as a pious German woman would to a strange, costumed man barging into her room, with confusion and stiff courtesy. Henry, instantly furious and humiliated, stormed out. He immediately called Cromwell and began whining. The famous quote, delivered in a mixture of horror and disgust, was, ****, I like her not. I like her not. ****, the moment he saw her in the flesh, in her German dress, Henry found her unattractive and dull. The man who had broken the Church of Rome to get a divorce was now trying to unbreak an alliance because his new wife couldn't play the lute. It's almost hilariously pathetic. But it was Anne's doom. Henry immediately began plotting how to get out of the marriage. The dowry was already paid. The alliance was signed. He was now married to a woman he found physically repulsive. What to do? This is where the political marriage is quietly dissolved, not by death, but by bureaucratic pettiness. They went through with the ceremony, and they were officially married. But the subsequent 6 months were a quiet, humiliating non-event. Henry avoided her. He complained to Cromwell that he couldn't perform his marital duties. He called her the Flanders mare, which is a truly cruel and undeserved nickname that history has. Regrettably, kept alive, the grounds for the annulment were truly ridiculous. They claimed that the marriage was invalid because Anne had previously been engaged to another European nobleman, and therefore, the entire political marriage was based on a faulty contract. The other grounds, Henry testified that he was unable to consummate the marriage because of her looks. He said he left her as good a maid as he found her, because, again, it had to be her fault, and, thankfully, was smart enough to read the room. She had seen what happened to Henry's previous wives. She knew Catherine of Aragon had suffered an exile and death for refusing to cooperate. She chose the path of quiet survival. When the annulment was presented to her, she did not fight. She did not argue about love or honor. She simply agreed, and this quiet, dignified surrender was the most powerful move of her entire life. Henry, relieved that he hadn't had to execute her, rewarded her handsomely. He gave her a massive land settlement, including several gorgeous properties, and most importantly, he gave her the title of Asterisk, the king's beloved sister. Asterisk, Anne of Cleves ended up the wealthiest, most independent, and longest surviving of all Henry's wives. The political marriage failed utterly, but the personal outcome was, ironically, the most successful of the lot. She got the riches, the freedom, and kept her head firmly attached to her neck, which was a massive win in Tudor England. Her life, post-marriage, was quiet, comfortable, and spent primarily breeding dogs and chickens. A peaceful end to a humiliating political transaction. So we leave the English drizzle and Anne of Cleves' quiet success story, and we float over to a queen who loved power, craved the political drama, and whose life was ultimately ruined by her own eccentric, scholarly mind. Let's take a slow, deep breath and float over the quiet, cold waters of the Baltic, heading to a different kind of monarchy, a place where the problem wasn't genetic inbreeding or fashion disasters, but simply a woman who had the utter audacity to have a truly interesting, intellectual mind. We are going to spend some quiet time with Christina, Queen of Sweden Christina was born in 1626, and she was the daughter of the Lion of the North, Gustavus Adolphus Now, Gustavus Adolphus was basically the rock star of the Protestant world, a military genius who was crushing it during the 30 Years' War. He was everything a 17th century monarch was supposed to be: loud, brave, and slightly terrifying. When Christina was born, the court had been anxiously awaiting a male heir. Her mother, Maria Eleonora of Brandenburg, had already lost to babies, so the pressure was intense. The story goes that when Christina was born, she was so hairy and had such a robust cry that the midwives initially thought she was a boy. The official announcement was that the king had been blessed with a son, and then, after the confusion was sorted out, everyone just sort of collectively decided, well, close enough. Gustavus Adolphus determined that his heir would be a warrior regardless of the biology, decided to raise Christina as a prince. She learned to ride, to hunt, to swear, and to govern. She was taught logistics, strategy, and theology. She was given an education so rigorous and masculine that it absolutely bored her to tears. Because here is the great, ironic twist of her life. All that training meant she could conquer a kingdom, but all she really wanted to do was sit in a quiet room and read a book. Gustavus Adolphus was killed in battle when Christina was only 6, leaving her as the reigning queen. But her childhood and adolescence were dominated by a single, inescapable political requirement. The political marriage Sweden needed an heir. They were a powerful, newly Protestant military machine, and they needed a male child to secure the dynasty. The Council of State was constantly presenting her with lists of eligible, boring German princes, and Christina, with her massive, active, intellectual mind, simply kept saying no. She absolutely, fundamentally refused to be a broodmare for the Vasa dynasty. She saw marriage for what it was: the end of her intellectual freedom and the beginning of a life spent in childbirth and political maneuvering. She had the brains of a king, but the court only wanted the womb of a queen. So, how did she avoid it? She played the ultimate royal defense mechanism. Eccentricity and intellectual snobbery. She gathered around her the brightest minds in Europe. She invited philosophers, linguists, and scholars to the dark, cold, quiet Swedish court. She essentially turned the palace into a very high-level, exclusive university, and she was the dean. Her absolute favorite guest was the French philosopher René Descartes. Descartes, the man who gave us I think, therefore I am, arrived in Stockholm, full of the warm certainty of French philosophy, and Christina proceeded to destroy his health. She insisted that Descartes come to her private library at **5 o'clock in the morning to discuss philosophy because, of course, if you're a royal intellectual, why have a sensible midday meeting when you can drag the greatest mind in Europe out of a warm bed and into a freezing Swedish morning? Descartes, apparently unaccustomed to Swedish winters or 5 a.m. meetings, caught pneumonia and died in 1650. Christina was distraught, but only momentarily. She simply replaced him with the next available intellectual. She was known to sleep only 5 hours a night, wander around in men's boots, and dismiss all the stuffy, boring etiquette of the court. She hated the pomp, she hated the jewelry, and she absolutely hated the heavy German gowns. Her ministers were tearing their hair out. They kept saying, "Your Majesty, please, marry your cousin, Charles the 10th Gustav, and give us an heir. We don't care about the difference between rationalism and empiricism. We need a baby." And Christina just kept responding by holding another all-night Greek seminar. Her behavior created a crisis, and not just a personal one. Her political marriage was to the kingdom itself, and she was failing her side of the contract by refusing to secure the line. Her own mind was what ultimately made her political position impossible. And then she did the truly shocking thing. She performed the ultimate, final, massive act of self-determination in the history of European queens. She abdicated the throne. In 1654, at the age of 28, she voluntarily gave up the crown of Sweden. Her cousin, Charles X Gustav, the man she refused to marry, was the beneficiary. She traded the immense power of a Protestant queen for the immense freedom of an unattached, wealthy, intellectual woman. It was a massive screw you to the entire dynastic system. But the real fun, the real political melodrama, happened immediately after. As she traveled south, heading for warmer, more culturally interesting lands, she did another massive historical mic drop. She converted to Catholicism This was the ultimate betrayal of her father's Protestant legacy and her Swedish kingdom. It was a political explosion designed, mostly, to ensure she was completely, irrevocably free of the North. She adopted the name Christina Alexandra. She dressed in men's clothes, often riding astride on a horse. She was loud, opinionated, and a total eccentric. She eventually settled in Rome, where she became a patronage powerhouse. She was welcomed by the Pope, who was, of course, thrilled to get a former Protestant queen of Sweden in the fold. But Christina couldn't just enjoy her retirement. She was still a royal woman, and she still had to stir up trouble. She decided she was going to interfere in the succession of Naples. She decided she was going to try and become Queen of Poland. She was a constant, loud headache for every diplomat and cardinal in Rome. Her final, most dramatic act of personal chaos occurred in 1657 at her French residence. She had her stablemaster, Marchese Gian Rinaldo Monaldeschi secretly executed for treason. She felt he had betrayed her personal confidence. This was a massive scandal, an abuse of her royal privilege, and a moment that revealed that the scholarly queen was still capable of cold, brutal, and very royal emotional meltdowns. She was the one royal woman who tried to escape the political marriage by dissolving the entire political contract, and she ended up just as miserable, lonely, and controversial as any of the women who stayed. Christina of Sweden died in Rome in 1689. She was buried in St. Peter's Basilica, one of only 3 women to receive that honor, which is a massive irony considering she was essentially a political failure. By all dynastic standards, she chose intellect over air and personal freedom over political duty, and her life was a beautiful, chaotic mess because of it. So we leave the lonely intellectual in the quiet grandeur of the Vatican, and we float over to a queen who had no such intellectual aspiration. A woman whose marriage failed not because she was too smart, but because she was simply born on the wrong side of a very messy, dramatic historical moment. Let's take a slow, deep breath and leave the quiet, scholarly solitude of Rome. We are crossing the continent, heading west and slightly south towards the glitter and eventual horrible collapse of the French Bourbon court. We are going to settle in with Marie Antoinette a woman whose political marriage was perhaps the most spectacular, extravagant, and ultimately lethal political transaction in all of European history. Her tragedy was not a divorce or an execution by a paranoid husband, but an execution by the entire French nation. Marie Antoinette was born Maria Antonia in 1755. She was the 15th child of the mighty Maria Theresa the formidable Empress of Austria, who was basically the ultimate momager of the 18th century. Maria Theresa's goal was simple: marry her children into every major royal house in Europe to secure the Austrian Empire. It was a massive, multi-generational project of dynastic networking. The most important of these matches was France. For 2 centuries, France and Austria had been bitter, bloody rivals. They had fought huge, expensive wars over who got to have the most boring bits of territory in Central Europe. But in 1756, they decided to be friends. This was called the diplomatic revolution and Marie Antoinette was the living, breathing, very expensive seal on that deal. She was designated to marry the Dauphin Louis August the heir to the French throne. This was a classic, high-stakes political marriage. It was meant to ensure European peace. Now, Marie Antoinette was a sweet, slightly frivolous, and absolutely uninterested student. Her mother had to hire special tutors to frantically cram the French language and French court customs into her brain before she was shipped out. She was literally a teenager who was educated on a deadline. In 1770, at the age of 14, she made the ultimate, symbolic transition. The French insisted that the exchange of the bride take place on a small, neutral island in the middle of the Rhine River. It was a completely empty pavilion, built just for this purpose. The symbolism was brutal. She was literally stripped of every Austrian garment she possessed, redressed entirely in French clothes, and officially handed over to the French delegation. She was property, and they wanted a clean transfer of ownership. She was then taken to Versailles to marry Louis August, who was the very definition of an awkward teenager. He was fat, shy, deeply religious, obsessed with hunting, and frankly, had the social skills of a bewildered forest troll. This contrasts the glamorous, vivacious, frivolous Austrian import paired with the quiet, chunky, boring French heir was the first sign that this political marriage was going to be an emotional and social disaster. The wedding itself was the most expensive party in the history of the world up to that point. But the real failure began that night. The core purpose of a political marriage is, of course, to produce an heir. And for Louis August and Marie Antoinette, absolutely nothing happened. For ***, 7 years, Yes, 7 years. A marriage of the two most powerful teenagers in Europe. And they couldn't quite manage the most basic dynastic requirement. This was an absolute political nightmare. The court whispered about it constantly. Was it the Dauphin's fault? Was the Dauphin impotent? Was the entire alliance cursed? The truth, as always with the Bourbons, was less dramatic and far weirder. Louis August was likely suffering from a condition called phimosis, which made the act painful. It was a minor, easily fixable physical ailment, but in the environment of 18th century royal embarrassment, it was a massive, paralyzing secret. Imagine the immense pressure on Marie Antoinette during this time. Every single noble, every single servant, every single political rival in Europe knew that she was the Queen of France in title, but effectively still a maid in fact. She was trapped in the most extravagant palace on earth, unable to fulfill her only job, and married to a husband who was just a gigantic, shy, well-meaning political problem. Her reaction, naturally, was to overcompensate wildly. She spent money, a lot of money. She gambled, she bought incredibly expensive diamonds, and she developed a massive, complicated hairstyle that required tiny ships and birds to be woven into her powdered hair. She escaped the suffocating court etiquette by running off to her private estate. The Petit Trianon a tiny, fake peasant village built right on the grounds of Versailles. She played at being a simple milkmaid while the rest of the country was genuinely starving. She became known as Madame Deficit asterisk. The French people, who already hated her because she was L'Autrichian the Austrian woman. A symbol of the alliance they didn't trust now hated her because she was bankrupting the country. The great irony is that the sexual problem was finally fixed in 1777 thanks to a diplomatic visit from Marie Antoinette's older brother Joseph II, who apparently had a very frank no-nonsense talk with Louis XVI about his technical difficulties. Louis XVI was successfully repaired, and the Queen began producing children. The political marriage was finally, biologically, fulfilled. But by 1778, it was too late. The damage was done. The years of frivolity, the Austrian label, and the perceived waste had entrenched it deep. Bitter hatred among the French public. Her political marriage was fundamentally sound. It produced children, and it secured the alliance, but its symbolic failure in those first 7 years was catastrophic. The tragedy of Marie Antoinette is that her political marriage was ruined not by a single courtier or a single jealous relative, but by millions of angry, starving people. She was a political object whose value plummeted when the country she was sold to decided to liquidate the entire royal firm when the French Revolution finally erupted. It wasn't just a political upheaval. It was the ultimate rejection of the entire dynastic system that had created her. The lavish clothes, the petty gambling, the 7 years of sexual failure, all of it came back to haunt her in the quiet, terrifying moments of her imprisonment. The end of her political life was the end of her actual life. She was stripped of her title, her husband, and her children, all because her political marriage, the deal sealed on that neutral island, was perceived as a massive act of corruption against the nation. And so we leave the magnificent, dreadful palace of Versailles, now quiet and empty. We float over to our final political bride, a woman whose life was ruined not by revolution, but by being forced to marry a man who was already deeply, disastrously in love with someone else. Let's take a slow, gentle breath and leave the horrifying glare of the French Revolutionary Court. We are crossing the Channel once more, settling into the damp, opulent, and scandal-ridden world of the English Regency era. This is the world of powdered wigs, immense debt, and a deeply dysfunctional royal family, the Hanoverians. And here, we meet a woman whose political marriage was ruined by a massive personality clash, and a groom who simply refused to participate. We are talking about Caroline of Brunswick Caroline was born in 1768 in Brunswick, Germany. She was a German princess, of course, because English monarchs were historically terrible at marrying people who weren't German. And even more dynastically correct, she was the first cousin of her designated groom, George, Prince of Wales, George, our prince, was, at the time, the Prince Regent and would later become King George IV. He was, to put it mildly, a complicated man. History called him the first gentleman of Europe. But what that really meant was that he was incredibly self-obsessed, a massive dandy, deeply devoted to his clothing and architecture, and quite simply, ruinously in debt, George needed a massive infusion of cash from Parliament to pay off his wine bills and his furniture collection. Parliament's price for this cash? He had to stop being a scandalous bachelor and perform the most basic dynastic duty, get married, and produce an heir, The problem was that George had already married Dot secretly. Years before, he had gone through a ceremony with a Catholic widow named Maria Fitzherbert Since marrying a Catholic violated the Act of Settlement, this marriage was illegal in the eyes of the state. But George, being George, considered her his true wife. So when the political marriage to Caroline was negotiated in 1794, the entire foundation was built on a lie. George was forced to marry his cousin, who was a Protestant, just to get Parliament's money. While his heart and a very messy, illegal marriage was already elsewhere, Caroline, meanwhile, was not exactly being prepared for the refined elegance of the English court. Brunswick was a small, rather boisterous, and fairly informal place. She was known to be loud, slightly vulgar, and fond of telling inappropriate jokes. She was, essentially, a messy person. And you absolutely cannot be a messy person in the highly critical, quiet world of royal duty. The stage was set for a disaster of operatic proportions. Caroline arrived in England in April 1795, full of a naive German princess's hope. George, already nervous and resentful that he was being forced into this, went to meet her. This meeting is one of the most famous, horrifying first encounters in history. The moment George saw her, he immediately called for his attendant and, in a loud whisper, demanded a glass of brandy because, apparently, one needs fortification to deal with a new political bride who is not quite as delicate as one had hoped. George's immediate reaction was one of physical repulsion. He was an aesthete, remember, obsessed with beauty and fashion. And Caroline's rough and ready manners and slightly unpolished style were a personal insult to his delicate sensibilities. Caroline, meanwhile, looked at her large, powdered, and heavily corseted cousin and supposedly said, with her usual lack of filter, "The prince is very fat and not at all like his portrait." And with that, the political alliance was instantly, emotionally dead. The wedding, just days later, was a miserable spectacle. George was so intoxicated from the brandy he consumed to calm his nerves that he could barely stand at the altar. He spent the entire ceremony muttering and swaying. It was a humiliating, drunken mess that everyone at court witnessed. The purpose of the political marriage was purely reproductive. George, despite his hatred, managed to perform his royal duty. Exactly *1 time. The political transaction was completed on the first or second night. Because 9 months later, in January 1796, their daughter, Princess Charlotte was born, and the second that baby girl, the precious spare heir, was safely delivered, George promptly filed for a permanent, legal separation. The political bond was instantly severed, but the political person of Caroline was stuck. She was the Princess of Wales, mother of the heir, but she was entirely unwanted and unwelcome. George forbade her from entering his home and severely limited her access to their daughter. Caroline's life for the next decades was a quiet, humiliating exile. She was forced to live in Blackheath, a house outside of London, while George held his glittering court, surrounded by his actual mistress, or, his other wife. She eventually got tired of the constant emotional isolation and the dull English drizzle, and she decided to perform her own dramatic act of rebellion. She left England entirely in 1814. She decided to go on a grand tour of the Mediterranean and basically live her best, messy, unpolished life. Her scandalous travels across the continent became the ultimate ammunition for her estranged husband. She was seen traveling with a handsome Italian equerry, Bartolomeo Pergami, often in the company of a young boy who was rumored to be her adopted son. Her behavior was decidedly unroyal, completely flouting the quiet, pious expectations of British society. The final, catastrophic act of this failed political marriage came in 1820. George III, the mad old king, finally died. George IV was now king, and Caroline, technically, was now queen consort . George IV was absolutely furious. He wanted a clean break. He tried to bribe her to stay on the continent. But Caroline, tired of being dismissed and tired of being a political punchline, said no . She sailed back to England to claim her crown and her rightful position. This set the stage for the trial of Queen Caroline . George IV forced Parliament to open a massive, humiliating public investigation into her conduct, effectively trying to divorce her on the grounds of adultery and scandalous behavior. It was a massive spectacle. The entire nation was obsessed. The public, however, hated George IV for his massive debts and his self-obsession. They embraced Caroline as the wronged, messy, unpolished, and very real wife. They saw her trial as the ultimate cruelty of the dynastic system. But even with the public on her side, the trial itself was the final destruction of her personal dignity. Parliament eventually dropped the bill, but George refused to acknowledge her. The political marriage remained a broken contract. The end was a quiet, crushing defeat. In July 1821, George IV's grand coronation took place. Caroline, determined to force her way in, showed up at Westminster Abbey's doors. But the guards, under explicit orders from the king, slammed the doors shut. The Queen of England was denied entry to her own coronation. She died just 3 weeks later, heartbroken and utterly destroyed by a political transaction that had lasted exactly one night. She was stripped of her title, her husband, and her dignity, all to protect the fragile ego and vast debts of her terrible husband. A truly sad, slow descent into public humiliation. And with that final sad picture of the locked door, let's take a slow, gentle breath before we float over to a story that combines the madness of Spain and the boredom of a forced alliance into one final quiet and deeply unfortunate royal life. Let's take a slow, gentle breath and leave the crushing door of Westminster Abbey. Floating south and east once more, we return to Spain, not to the quiet, dusty tragedy of the Habsburgs, but to the loud, chaotic, and desperately unstable world of the 19th century Bourbons. This is a story of a woman who was a political pawn from the moment she was born, forced to marry not for love, or even for political strength, but for dynastic impotence ***. We are talking about Isabella II, Queen of Spain ***. Isabella was born in 1830, and her entire life was a political hot mess from day one. Her father, King Ferdinand VII, had done the unthinkable. He abolished the old Salic law just before he died, ensuring that his daughter, Isabella, would inherit the throne instead of his brother, Don Carlos. The moment Isabella was 3 years old and queen, her uncle, Don Carlos, declared war. This started the Carlist Wars ***, a massive, bloody, 70-year conflict that tore Spain apart. This meant that Isabella II was a queen who was born *** at war ***, and her very existence was an act of political defiance. She was raised in a state of constant siege and political upheaval. The Spanish court was a maelstrom of liberals and conservatives, generals and priests, all desperate to seize control of the young queen. Her mother, the Queen Regent Maria Cristina, was barely capable of controlling the country, let alone her strong-willed, emotional daughter. The pressure of the *** political marriage *** started the moment she hit puberty. Isabella was the most dangerous and eligible single woman in Europe. Why dangerous? Because whoever she married would determine the future direction of Spain and, crucially, the balance of power between Europe's giants, France and Britain. This situation became known as the Spanish marriages crisis of the 1840s, a diplomatic nightmare for the ages. France, led by King Louis Philippe, and Britain, led by Queen Victoria, were playing a vicious game of royal chess with Isabella's hand. Britain's candidate. They wanted Isabella to marry a German prince, a sturdy, non-threatening outsider who would keep Spain neutral. France's candidate, France, was determined to avoid any British influence in Spain. Their great plan was utterly Machiavellian. The French plan was to force Isabella to marry a member of the Spanish royal family who was considered physically and mentally unfit to produce an heir. This would ensure that the Spanish throne would eventually pass to Isabella's sister, Luisa Fernanda, who was simultaneously married to a French prince, Antoine, Duke of Montpensier ***. In short, France wanted Isabella's marriage to fail to produce children, thereby letting the throne fall into French dynastic hands. Isabella was desperately lobbying to marry someone she actually liked, a handsome, interesting man, or at least a man who seemed like a functional human being. But her choice didn't matter. Her body was a political tool, and the ministers needed a specific, dysfunctional outcome. The final, disastrous choice of groom was her first cousin, Francis, Duke of Cadiz ***. Francis was chosen precisely because he was effeminate, weak, and widely rumored throughout Europe to be impotent. He was a disastrously unsuitable candidate, but politically perfect for France, which wanted the Spanish Bourbon line to die out. Isabella, too, who was passionate, strong-willed, and loved life, was forced into a marriage with a man who could not, or would not, fulfill his dynastic duty. The ceremony took place in 1846 as part of a catastrophic double wedding. Isabella married Francis, and her sister Louisa married the French Prince Montpensier. The French were celebrating their diplomatic victory. The Spanish queen was utterly distraught. On her wedding night, Isabella, who was known to have a rather earthy sense of humor, reportedly shouted, "What could I do with such an effeminate man?" The marriage was immediately and publicly a disaster. Francis did not perform his marital duty, spending his time instead with his own male favorites. Isabella, abandoned and furious, found herself trapped in the familiar political cage. Her political function was to be a wife and a mother, and her husband was actively undermining both roles. Her response was one of personal rebellion against her wretched fate. Isabella became one of the most notoriously scandalous queens in European history. She desperately sought affection, passion, and companionship outside her miserable political contract. She took a series of lovers, ministers, military officers, singers, and generals. Her personal life was a quiet, furious protest against the political prison she was forced to occupy, unfortunately, in the rigid, conservative world of 19th century Spain. A queen's happiness was secondary to her piety and political conformity. The scandals, the rumors, and the constant political chaos that surrounded her numerous personal affairs simply provided ammunition to her many enemies. Every lover was a political faction. Every child she had, and she had many children, whose paternity was always a subject of fierce and bitter public debate, was a political risk. Her forced marriage to Francis had been intended as a quiet, dynastic failure. Instead, it detonated into a loud, public political explosion. The Spanish public, dealing with decades of war, economic failure, and political instability, looked at their frivolous, scandal-ridden queen, and they saw a monarchy that had failed them. The final disaster arrived in 1868 with La Gloriosa, the Glorious Revolution. Military leaders, who had had enough of the political infighting and the Queen's constant chaos, staged a coup. Isabella II was forced to flee the country and spent the rest of her long life in exile in Paris. Her political marriage, which was supposed to secure the Bourbon line, ended up doing the exact opposite by forcing her into a loveless, unfulfilling match with Francis. Her ministers guaranteed her unhappiness, which fueled her scandalous rebellion, which in turn gave her political enemies the perfect justification to overthrow the throne entirely. Isabella II lived until 1904, spending her final decades in quiet, luxurious exile. She was a woman of immense warmth and charisma, but her life was a testament to the idea that when politics dictates passion, the political structure itself is often the final victim. We have journeyed through to centuries of European history, from the cold, damp castles of Tudor England to the bloody palace of the French Revolution, and back again to the genetically fragile courts of Spain. What binds all these royal women? One of the mad: Catherine of Aragon, Mariana of Austria, Anne of Cleves, Christina of Sweden, Marie Antoinette, Caroline of Brunswick, and Isabella II is the silent truth of their existence. They were not people. They were asterisk asterisk treaties asterisk asterisk. Their bodies were geographic borders. Their wands were dynastic vaults. Their personalities, their intellects, and their happiness were all strictly secondary to the single, cold metric of their political contract. Asterisk, 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 did she secure the alliance? Asterisk, 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 did she deliver? The male heir, asterisk, asterisk, when they succeeded, they were powerful, but still constrained. When they failed, whether through death, infertility, bad fashion, or simply having too strong a mind, they were ruthlessly discarded, exiled, divorced, or, in the most spectacular cases, guillotined. The tragedy of the political marriage is that it demanded perfection from women who were, like all people, messy, complicated, and entirely human. It is the most powerful reminder that in the cold, transactional calculus of dynastic power, the cost is almost always paid in the quiet, heartbreaking suffering of the queen. Thank you for floating with us through the turbulent, tear-stained halls of royal history.
Today we will talk about a very old history topic. This story is from a time when there were no house, no cities, no schools and no books. This is the story of fire. Fire is not just a thing but that burns. Fire changed everything. Fire made human different from animals. Without fire, there would be no food like today, no protection, no progress, and maybe no modern world. This is the story of how fire slowly changed human life step by step. Long, long ago, humans were very weak. They had no clothes, no proper homes, and no weapons. They lived in forest and open land. They were always afraid. Big animals hunted them, cold weather, hot there, dark nights scared them. Human ate raw food. Raw meat was hard to chew. Raw plants were bitter and dangerous. People got sick easily. Many people died young. Life was very hard. The first time humans saw fire. Yes, fire was not first made by human. Fire came from nature. Lighting heat trees, volcanoes burned land, dry forest caught fire. Early humans saw fire from far away. They saw bright light. They felt heat. At first, they were scared. Fire was dangerous. Fire burned skin. Fire destroyed trees. But humans are curious. They watched fire carefully. Slowly, humans understood something important. Fire is dangerous, but fire is also useful. Fire give heat, fire give light. People start keeping fire interested of running away. They carried burning wood from natural fire. They portrayed that fire carefully. If fire dead, life became hard again. Fire became like a friend. Fire and warmth. Cold weather was deadly before fire. Winter killed many people. People shivered at night. Fire changed this. Fire kept human warm and people could live in a colder place. They could travel to new lands. Fire helped humans survive winter. This was a very big change in history. Fire and light. Before fire, night was very dark. Darkness brought fear. Wild animal hunted at night. Fire brought light. People could see at night. They could stay together. They could talk and think. This helped humans before social. This helped humans share idea. Fire created community. Fire and protection. Fire scared wild animal. Animal we are afraid of flame. They stayed away from fire. Humans used fire as protection. They slept near fire. This saved many lives. Fire became a side. Fire and cooked food. This was one of the biggest change in human history. Yes, human learned to cook food. Cooked meat was soft. Cooked plant were safe. People became stronger. Their brains grew bigger. Good food gave more energy. Scientists believe Cooking helped human become intelligent. Fire helped create the human brain. Fire and tools. Fire helped humans make tools. They hardened wood in fire. They shaped stone using heat. Later, fire helped me melt metal. This lead to copper tools. They bronze tools. They iron tools. Fire started technology. Fire and caves. Human lived in caves. Caves were dark and cold. Fire made caves livable. Fire kept animal away. Fire gave light inside cave. Human painted on cave walls using firelight. This was early art. This was early culture. Fire and social life. Fire brought people together. People sat around fire, they talked, they shared stories. This was the beginning of language, this was the beginning of tradition. Fire created human society, learned to make fire. At first, human protected natural fire. Later, they learned to make fire. They rubbed stones, they rubbed wood. This was a huge discovery. Now fire was always available. Human we are no longer dependent on nature. This was the freedom. Fire and migration. Fire allowed humans to move. They went to good lands. They crossed mountains. Fire helped humans spread across the world, from Africa to Asia, from Asia to Europe, from Europe to everywhere. Fire helped humans conquering that plant. Fire and religion. Fire became scared. People believe fire was a magic. People worshipped fire. Yes, many religions used fire. Fire rituals started. Fire became a symbol of life. Fire and farming. Fire helped clear forest. People burned land. This made farming possible. Yes, farming changed human life. People settled down. Villages formed and cities were born. Are you know? Fast start civilization. Fire and industry. Thousands of years later, fire powered machine, fire boiled water, steam and gas were born. Factors started, trains moved, fire became energy. Fire and modern world. Today, fire still help us. Electric comes from fire. Cooking or users use fire. Industries uses fire, and fire still saves human life. Conclusion: fire is not just that the fire is the history. Fire made humans human. Without fire, there would be no civilization, no cities, no technology. Fast is the greatest discovery in a human history. This thank you today. Now this is a very interesting story. I am feeling very relaxed now, because I am try to very best now to please subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you. Today we will talk about a very old history topic. This story is from a time when there were no house, no cities, no schools, and no books. This is the story of Fire. Fire is not just a thing, but that burns. Fire changed everything. Fire made human different from animals. Without fire, there would be no food like today, no protection, no progress, and maybe no modern world. This is the story of how fire slowly changed human life step by step. Long, long ago, humans were very weak. They had no clothes, no proper homes, and no weapons. They lived in forest and open land. They were always afraid. Big animals hunted them, cold weather, hot there, dark nights scared them. Human ate raw food. Raw meat was hard to chew. Raw plants were bitter and dangerous. People got sick easily. Many people died young. Life was very hard. The first time humans saw fire. Yes, fire was not first made by human. Fire came from nature. Lighting heat trees, volcanoes burned land, dry forest caught fire. Early humans saw fire from far away. They saw bright light. They felt heat. At first, they were scared. Fire was dangerous. Fire burned skin. Fire destroyed trees. But humans are curious. They watched fire carefully. Slowly, humans understood something important. Fire is dangerous, but fire is also useful. Fire give heat, fire give light. People start keeping fire interested of running away. They carried burning wood from natural fire. They portrayed that fire carefully. If fire dead, life became hard again. Fire became like a friend. Fire and warmth. Cold weather was deadly before fire. Winter killed many people. People slept at night. Fire changed this. Fire kept human warm and people could live in a colder place. They could travel to new lands. Fire helped humans survive winter. This was a very big change in history. Fire and light. Before fire, night was very dark. Darkness brought fear. Wild animal hunted at night. Fire brought light. People could see at night. They could stay together. They could talk and think. This helped humans before social. This helped humans share idea. Fire created community. Fire and protection. Fire scared wild animal. Animal were afraid of flame. They stayed away from fire. Humans used fire as protection. They slept near fire. This saved many lives. Fire became a side fire and cooked food. This was one of the biggest change in human history. Yes, human learned to cook food. Cooked meat was soft. Cooked plant were safe. People became stronger. Their brains grew bigger. Good food gave more energy. Scientists believe cooking helped human become intelligent. Fire helped create the human brain. Fire and tools. Fire helped humans make tools. They hardened wood in fire. They shaped stone using heat. Later, fire helped me melt metal. This lead to copper tools. They bronze tools. They iron tools. Fire started technology. Fire and caves. Human lived in caves. Caves were dark and cold. Fire made caves livable. Fire kept animal away. Fire gave light inside cave. Human painted on cave walls using firelight. This was early art. This was early culture. Fire and social life. Fire brought people together. People sat around fire, they talked, they shared stories. This was the beginning of language, this was the beginning of tradition. Fire created human society, learned to make fire. At first, human protected natural fire. Later, they learned to make fire. They rubbed stones, they rubbed wood. This was a huge discovery. Now fire was always available. Human were no longer dependent on nature. This was the freedom. Fire and migration. Fire allowed humans to move. They went to good lands. They crossed mountains. Fire helped humans to spread across the world, from Africa to Asia, from Asia to Europe, from Europe to everywhere. Fire helped humans conquering that plant. Fire and religion. Religion. Fire became scared. People believe fire was a magic. People worshipped fire. Yes, many religions used fire. Fire rituals started. Fire became a symbol of life. Fire and farming. Fire helped clear forest. People burned land. This made farming possible. Yes, farming changed human life. People settled down. Villages formed and cities were born. Are you know? Fast start civilization. Fire and industry. Thousands of years later, fire powered machine, fire boiled water, steam and gas were born. Factories started, trains moved, fire became energy. Fire and modern world. Today, fire still help us. Electric comes from fire. Cooking or users use fire. Industries uses fire, and fire still saves human life. Conclusion: fire is not just that the fire is the history. Fire made humans human. Without fire, there would be no civilization, no cities, no technology. Fast is the greatest discovery in human history. This, thank you today. Now this is a very interesting story. I am feeling mm, very relaxed now, because I am try to very best now. To please subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you.